Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I'm here to talk about Trevor Peek versus Charlie Campbell. I think this fight is going to be awesome. I think there's a good chance it ends with a violent finish for either guy. And I think there's a decent chance it goes to a decision but contains a lot of violence. And my prediction, which I'm giving to you only because you're forcing me to, I'm going with Trevor Peek winning. Slight edge to Trevor Peek, and enough of an edge for me to have bet on him as a decent underdog. But I don't have the strongest lean one way or another here. I just like a lot of traits that Trevor Peek has. And of course, between the two of them, only one of them's been knocked dead, and it was Charlie Campbell in his most recent loss 2 years ago to Chris Duncan. But Charlie Campbell, I'd say, is the better fighter. I don't know. He's the more polished fighter anyway. Definitely the better technician on the feet. Everything Trevor Peek does is raw. It's either strength or power. He's making the most of one of them in every movement or strike that he throws. And that's why he's got a lot of knockouts, Trevor Peek. He's got 9 wins, 8 knockouts. The one other fight is actually a decision, and that takes place in his last fight against Muhammad Yahya, where he mixed in some wrestling and looked like a new fighter. But knockout is how most of Trevor Peek's wins are going to end. He's just got that power, and a lot of times he insists on the knockout, chasing down Kama Worthy at the end of round 1, which is also where he knocked out Eric Gonzalez in his UFC debut. But even though most of his wins are first-round knockouts, he's got one in round 2 and one in round 3 in some important fights that he had before getting to the UFC. He won in round 2 on the Contender Series, which is pretty much you have one foot in the UFC at that point. But this guy, Malik Lewis, almost had him out of there for a while. Trevor Peek, the fight was not going his way. Fight could have been stopped, but he survived, kept himself in it, and then turned the tables, and Malik Lewis couldn't handle him in round 2. He outlasted him and got him out of there. And against Ben Brewer, this other guy, he got him out of there in round 3. The guy, Ben, was a seasoned fighter with a good record, but he was coming off a 5-year layoff or whatever, and I don't know, just to decide to take one more fight. I don't think he fought since, but this was like 2 or 3 years ago. He came back, and despite being the bigger man, Trevor Peek outlasted him and took him out down the stretch. So even though he's a round 1 monster, Trevor Peek is showing a lot of great traits, and having those knockouts deep into the fight against some of the better fighters he's fought, it's a great look for him. But again, he's a step behind technically. Charlie Campbell's a much cleaner striker. He's got a good amount of knockouts as well. I think 5 knockouts in his 7 wins or whatever. And Charlie Campbell is a little taller anyway. He's 3 inches taller, although the reach is about the same. And again, he's just much more polished. He's actually got a few wins, 2 wins, I believe, via leg kicks, both of them in Bellator. And he was tested in both those fights, but he took over with the leg kicks. One guy was even chopping his leg up, and then he just landed 2 and took the guy out of the fight. But he's definitely the better outside striker between the two. Trevor Peek is going to want to be on the inside, where despite being smaller or whatever, shorter, he's the stronger guy, and in tight where he can land power. I'd say that's where he wants to be. He's the more powerful guy between the two, I think, as far as overhand punches go and whatever. But Charlie Campbell is the longer, taller striker. He'd rather be on the outside, but even on the inside, he's got different options that Peek might not have, knees up the middle and different stuff. But I think Trevor Peek, I favor him to win because I favor him to get on the inside of Charlie Campbell. And I think as far as the health goes, I've got to favor Trevor Peek. Despite almost getting finished by Malik Lewis, he's the one who's never been knocked out. Charlie Campbell was knocked dead in his most recent loss. Chris Duncan, a UFC fighter. And Charlie Campbell almost had him out, just like Malik Lewis did with Trevor Peek. Charlie Campbell almost had him out of there for the longest time, and then, boom, he got hit with a right hand, was floored, and then put away, out cold, with the follow-up shots. So, despite that being to a very good fighter, obviously, in Chris Duncan, who is in the UFC, it still was a concussion, a serious knockout, and it happened 2 years ago. So there's more doubt and more concern in the health of Charlie Campbell. And despite him being the cleaner striker, I'm picking Trevor Peek to make this a dirty fight. I do think Trevor Peek can rough him up on the inside, be the stronger man. And I think power and chin definitely favor Trevor. I should say Charlie's one other loss happened in his second fight or whatever, and it was a decision to this guy, Anthony Newton. It was pure wrestling. The guy was a pure wrestler, took him down every round. But in round 3, Charlie Campbell was defending takedowns. He still allowed himself to be pressured, obviously, but he looked much better than he did earlier. And in some ways, that was a pretty good look. So it's not like I have doubt in the cardio of Charlie Campbell, the technique. Really, I think he's got a lot of things going for him. It's just the health and the physicality, and of course, the grit and the drive of Trevor Peek. So I'm slightly favoring Trevor Peek here. I did bet on him, and I'll wait to see the props because I'm sure there's more things to bet on. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.